There was this whole argument before the Sulli documentary came out, people going back and forth online as to whether or not it should even be released in the first place. It's a tough one. On one hand, people felt because she's no longer with us, her privacy should be respected. And on the other hand, some of her fans who followed her career from the very start felt because this is her last interview, it needs to be released. Hopefully, one, to understand what happened to her and what she was going through in her final days, and two, to give her fans some type of closure. Now, before I watched this doco, I flip-flopped back and forth on this issue both ways. At first I thought, well, if it's going to be a bio, like a celebration of her life type thing, then her being a public figure and all, why not release it? However, if it's going to be a train wreck and disrespectful towards her or her memory in any way, then no, it shouldn't be released. Well, it did get released, and I just watched it. Spoiler alert, a bio or a celebration of her life, it wasn't. But where do I stand now on whether or not this should have been released? Well, stick around to find out.
호주남편입니다. 놀러와?
First up, I'm not going to go into detail about who Sulli was. If you've clicked on this video, you probably already know. If you don't, just quickly, she was a Korean child star who became a K-pop idol from a very young age. I mean, in K-pop they all do. And then later she moved into acting. She was an it girl, but had a bit of a reputation for being a bad girl as well. And because of this, she attracted a lot of hate online from K-netizens. I tried to look into where this hate originated from, and it seems to be mainly because she often posted selfies on Instagram where she wasn't wearing a bra underneath her shirt. She also dated a rapper who was way older than her, and also some of the stuff she'd say around feminism seemed to rub the Korean public up the wrong way. In short, she wasn't your typical idol. She'd just do as she pleased, which isn't very idol-like. If you want to know more about her, I'd encourage you to look it up, because this video is mostly going to focus on this particular interview which has been released on Netflix. If you haven't watched it, I'd encourage you to check it out, but I will warn you, it's very, very hard to watch. So if you're triggered easily by mental health issues, probably skip it. In fact, when the interview first started, like within a minute, my wife was like, how could anyone not tell she was depressed? They obviously knew, they just didn't care. Everyone was just trying to make money out of her. Then my wife couldn't watch anymore because she said it was just too sad. Sulli was clearly depressed and on edge. Some of her answers are so raw that it almost felt uncomfortable to watch. Some netizens have said she was brave to do this interview. Yeah, I think you could say she was a brave person. If you look at her life overall and the decisions she made, and the fact that she did this interview at all, let alone so honestly, you could argue she's brave. I have a little bit of a different perspective on this though. Yeah, I do think she was a brave person overall. However, I don't see the act of doing this interview itself as brave. When you're brave, I think you have something to lose. I think at the time of this interview taking place, she's already past the point of having anything to lose. By the time this interview starts, her soul's already stripped bare. It was so honest, so raw, so intimate, that I was left to wonder if she had already made the decision about unaliving herself before she even walked into this interview. In a way, this does feel like a goodbye letter to the world which was so cruel to her. From hearing her speak about her life, it seems like Sulli was only surrounded by parasites. Everyone was after their cut of her money. So going back to what my wife initially said, they all knew there was something wrong. They just didn't care enough to do anything about it. No one wanted to fumble the bag, basically. They were all just happy to be on the gravy train and were just gonna milk it for as long as it lasted. Some people even say her own mother was like that. I get K-pop stars are products, but can you imagine being told from like 9, 10 years of age by everyone around you, including your own mum, that you're a product? Not just any product, but an idol. Imagine what that does to your psyche as you're developing into a fully functional human being. She even said it herself. It was like she's living in a bubble. Also, another thing she said was something like from the age of 10 years old until the age of 20. So the main formative years of her life, I mean the whole period pretty much where you learn to become an adult, she was robbed of that experience because every decision for those 10 years was made for her by someone else. Think about that. Every decision, what you drink, what you eat, where you're at what time of day, who you speak to, who you're allowed to date or not date, how you're allowed to dress, etc., etc. All these decisions are made for you. You don't get a say. Imagine how that shapes your perception of reality and what it does to your mental development. One of the saddest parts to me was when she said that one of the only things she could decide to do herself was to hurt herself. physically. In other words, self-harming was her only way of exerting control over her life. Seriously, imagine the mindset she was in. If there was one thing that was positive from this documentary, and this could be me reaching because the whole thing is pretty dark and pretty grim, but if there was one thing, I'd say it's when she talks about being stuck in the matrix and getting the choice to take the red pill or the blue pill, and she chooses to take the red pill. She describes it as her awakening. A lot of other K-pop idols would have been subject to the exact same conditions as Sulli, even to this day. However, I'd wager that most of them would be unable to differentiate their true selves from their perfectly crafted K-pop product self that they've been shaped into. At least Sulli had the strength and the courage to take the red pill. She came to this place in her life where she was able to wake up from that K-pop persona and see the truth of her situation. She was able to completely break down and come to a place where she could be her real self, her true self, as opposed to Sulli the product. Go and watch what she says about people telling her she's a product. It's heartbreaking. The very next sentence, she says, "I don't know if I should be saying this." And she kind of cocks her head to the side, squints a little, and you can see that she's really engaged in this internal dialogue, this internal tug of war in her mind, debating if she should say what she's thinking or not. I believe it's a tug of war taking place between her real self, her true authentic self, and her K-pop product self, her perfect idol self that's been carefully constructed for herself and drilled into her from young. That's called brainwashing, by the way. And everyone from her parents, her hairstylist, her label, etc. bear some responsibility. She also says, even if they never said this directly to her, they treated her like a product. So this constant tug of war is what I believe made her make the decision to exert the ultimate control over her life once and for all, to end the constant tug of war. I think in her mind, in her perception of reality, it was about preserving the real self, which makes it even more heartbreaking. There's no other way to say it. I think what makes it so sad is the fact that she was so alone when she passed, not just physically but mentally too. In this interview, you can see how alone she really was, how disassociated from reality she was. In conclusion, and to her haters, I'd say it's easy to stand on the outside of all this and say she had everything. She's just a fool for doing what she did and throwing it all away. But when you watch this documentary, you have to ask yourself, really, what did she have? Like really, what did she have apart from a prison? Whether the prison was real or not depends entirely upon the point of perception. And what this interview does, and does well, is give you a very clear insight into her point of perception. And it's very clear to see that she believes she's trapped in some sort of mental prison. So to me, the real tragedy is that no one saw the real her, or at least recognized the real her until it was too late.
자장가요? 자장가? 자장가? 자장가. 자장가가 도대체 언제쯤 얘기지? 자장가. 자장가.
I don't think this interview was a train wreck. I don't think it embarrassed her or embarrassed her memory in any way. I think it's an embarrassment on the K-pop industry as a whole, and especially her management company and the people who were surrounding her at the time. She was sitting there in this interview being the real her and crying out for help. The fact that it has been released after what's happened makes it tragic, because now nothing can be done. It's too late. Yes, I know the South Korean parliament passed a law called Sulli's Law, but that's focusing more on cyberbullying, which is still an issue that needs to be addressed. And although I do think cyberbullying played a role in Sulli's demise, I think it conveniently lets the people who are really to blame for this off the hook, that being the labels and the management companies that she was signed to. You got to remember, most of these idols are not going to school and not having the everyday normal life experience we have during our development phase. So I think it's to be expected that because of their unique situation and because of the bubble they live in, they should be given by their management companies and labels significant tools and resources in order to help them develop the mental frameworks required to live their version of a normal life. At one point, Sulli is asked if she ever wished for a normal life, and she replies simply, "I have a normal life." I found that line really interesting, but I don't exactly know why. It just lingered with me.
아이고. 아! 안 돼. 안 돼.
In conclusion, although this is a really uncomfortable documentary to watch, I think this needed to be released, and also after learning more about her whilst researching this video, I think she would have wanted it to be released, to act as a cautionary tale so that the labels and managers and others involved in the K-pop industry can take a better care of their idols and help them develop a mindset for dealing with mental health. And hopefully some of the hateful fans realise at the end of the day, people are just people, and maybe it'll inspire them to be a little bit kinder in the comment sections. Let's hope that's what it does.
Now the final frame.